Right friends, welcome back to editorial discussion. I have taken 4 issues of the Hindu today. The first one is with regard to lines of defense. This is basically to implement this paper audit trail and look into this. This is Election Commission of India logo and control unit and ballot unit. This is ballot unit, this is control unit, and this machine is VVPAT, right. So, we are going to deliberate on this, and here Election Commission has asked for the early release of funds for the procurement of voter verifiable paper audit trail, voter verifiable paper audit trail machines for the 2019 Lok Sabha election, and 16 lakh VVPAT machines will be required, and this assumed significance as more and more opposition parties are asking for returning to paper ballots. So, here we are going to deliberate what is the mechanism of this EVMs, how they are strengthened during the past few years, subsequently what is meant by VVPAT and why it is not advisable to go back to paper ballots. So, these things we are going to deliberate. The first one is model 2 machines, then the editorial is talking about model 3 machines. What are the features of model 2 machines? Here in model 2 machines which were brought since 2006, additional features are given here. This is encryption basically, here dynamic coding of key codes on ballot units and their transfer as messages to the control unit. So, these are done in an encrypted manner. So, this is the beauty of this model 2 machines, and EVMs feature encoded software that is burnt one time on an programmable chips. So, the software is burnt one time. So, this features encoded software and it enables them to be used as standalone machines rather than computer connected units, right. So, EVMs will act as standalone machines. So, as per this model 2 upgradation, now it is not possible to hack these machines by remote devices, and further safeguards are built in model 3. Additional features are such as tamper detection. Here the machines produced after 2013 were provided with additional features such as tamper detection, and there are procedural rules of locking and storing EVMs before and after polling. At the same time, functional checks and tests in the presence of representatives of political parties is also incorporated. So, the editorial talks about what are the features in model 2 machines, that means upgradation, model 3 further upgradation, and the editorial is talking about VVPAT machines. What are the advantages of VVPAT machines? VVPAT machines basically you can check, or you can say you can cross check through the paper audit whomever you are voting. If you are pressing for X party and the party, or you can say the name of the person, that will be verifiable on the paper. So, here on the paper it will be verifiable to whom you have voted, and subsequently cross checking also can be done and auditing can be done if required, and if some candidate complains, it can be used for a recounting also through the paper, right. So, this cross checking of EVM results through the paper audit, completing another layer of accountability. At present, there is no accountability. If I am voting for X party, then there is no mechanism for me to check that whether it has gone to X or Y. And with paper audit, I am very sure that I voted for X. At the same time, if tomorrow somebody wants to cross check it, they can easily cross check it, and subsequently auditing can also be done. So, that is the advantage of VVPAT machines. right. So, these are indigenously produced machines, only the microchip is manufactured outside the country with the machine language embedded on it. Only microchip with the machine language embedded on it were produced outside the country, right. So, it is time to look at VVPAT machines. In view of the fact, several opposition parties are clamoring for going back to paper ballots, which is not at all advisable. Then the question arises, why reversal to paper ballots is not advisable? And please remember, this machine is basically paper trail or auditing through paper trail. It is not paper ballot. The voting will be still electronic, but you will have a facility to look at the candidate to whom you have voted. So, it is some sort of the cross check, but opposition parties are asking for going back to paper ballots. That means, you will stamp on the candidate to whom you are required to whom you are intended to vote. That was paper ballot, which was in vogue some time back. So, now it is not advisable to go back to paper ballots because of, in the days of paper ballots, electoral fraud in the form of rigging, stuffing of ballot boxes are the common features. Introduction of EVMs allowed greater voter participation. Next one is reverting to the older paper ballot system is a regressive step in fact. So, the only way out is to go for VVPAT machines. That means, to preserve the present system of electronic voting machines along with VVPAT, right. Next one is equity in debt. This editorial is with regard to N.K. Singh committee recommendations. Here the history of FRBM Act. FRBM Act was formulated in 2003, and what is the purpose of FRBM Act? FRBM Act purpose is to restrict fiscal deficit to 3% of GDP, but 14 years passed. We are not able to restrict it to 3% of GDP. Even for 2017-18 also, the fiscal deficit target is 3.2%. So, now the central government constituted N.K. Singh committee to revisit, or you can say to look at the aspects for modifying certain provisions of FRBM Act 2003. So, certain provisions of FRBM Act 2003 are proposed to be modified by the government, and for that purpose N.K. Singh committee was constituted. And excessive fiscal deficit will threaten the macroeconomic stability. Fiscal deficit must be within the limit, and if it goes beyond some limit, then it will threaten macroeconomic stability. And in your personal aspect also, if your income is some 10,000 rupees, or you can say 50,000 rupees per month, you can purchase a house whose EMI cannot exceed 20,000 or so. So, here macroeconomic stability for the economies is very, very important. Debt component should not exceed certain limit. Now, you may have a doubt, what is the problem with the more fiscal deficit? The fundamental problem is basically we are borrowing money, and part of the money we are using for revenue expenditure. Here you see difference between revenue expenditure and capital expenditure. You see, revenue expenditure means it is the short term expenses to meet the ongoing operating costs of running the business, or you can say operating in fact expenses, or you can say for undertaking repairs, for maintenance, that is revenue expenditure. And revenue expenditure is day to day expenditure, whereas capital expenditure is for creation of the assets. When an highway is constructed, when a factory is established, that is capital expenditure. Please differentiate. This is capital expenditure, this is revenue expenditure. Repairing the road is revenue expenditure. Constructing an expressway is capital expenditure. installing a new factory is capital expenditure, and repairing the machinery is revenue expenditure. Constructing a new house is capital expenditure, and whitewashing a house is revenue expenditure. So, the problem is the government is borrowing money. There is no problem in borrowing money, but part of that borrowing is going for revenue expenditure. That is the biggest worry. When you are borrowing money and subsequently you are going to 5-star hotels for lavishly spending, then it is not acceptable. Borrow money for constructing the house, that is acceptable. So, when the fiscal deficit increases, one basic problem is part of the money is used for revenue expenditure. That is one major problem, and leaving that problem aside, remaining issues are, if the debt increases, this will put unnecessary costs on the future generations. Basically, future generations are required to pay too much interest on these loans, or you can say the interest burden will increase in future when loans are increased at this juncture, because these are long term loans. So, we should not burden the future generations with interest payments. Next one is, it crowds out private investment. When government is borrowing more money, then it crowds out private investment. So, money in circulation, when government is taking more money, then money in circulation will be reduced, and subsequently interest rates also may increase, and subsequently the private investment may crowd out. Crowd in means more, crowd out means going away. So, when government is borrowing more, it may result in crowding out of private investment. Then the fiscal responsibility may cost the, fiscal irresponsibility may cost the jobs. Inflation may take place when borrowing is more, then domestic currency may be affected, then countries may go towards default situation. Almost we were on the verge of default during 1990 and 1991 before the economic reforms, right. So, these are the problems with more fiscal deficit. We discussed between the differences of capital and revenue expenditure, and why the government has gone for encasing committee. The reason is, FRPM Act was brought in 2003, but 14 years passed, we are not able to implement 3% fiscal deficit target in comparison to GDP, and sometimes government may be required to borrow more depending on the circumstances, but FRPM Act is restricting to 3%. So, it is unnecessarily restricting the government's desire to go for more borrowing sometimes, or you can say in times of need, government is not able to go for more borrowing. So, government should have leverage to decide what is best for the country. I may borrow more, I may go for massive expansion of infrastructure, which may ultimately benefit the future generations. I may borrow and I may establish companies, I may establish factories, which may ultimately benefit the future generations. So, this discretion must be with the government. That is why government wants to review this 3% target. It has gone for encasing committee. So, what are encasing committee recommendations? Here, encasing committee has gone for one landmark development of this public debt as the main anchor. What is the difference between fiscal deficit and public debt? Fiscal deficit is, in fact, the deficit, or you can say we will borrow money to finance the deficit. So, that is, you can say every year's borrowing, you can say, because we have to finance fiscal deficit. For that purpose, we borrow money from the market, that is every year, or you can say per year, that is the borrowing. And this borrowing, you are borrowing 100 this year, 100 next year, 100 next year, like that it accumulates. So, the accumulation of this fiscal deficit is public debt. So, public debt is one important parameter, and encasing committee, instead of fiscal deficit, by the year 2023, the main anchor must be public debt. As per encasing committee recommendations, public debt must be the main anchor by 2023, and 60% of GDP, it must be limited. 40% for center, 20% for states. So, it is in favor of limiting the public debt to 60% of GDP by 2023, and out of which 40% for center, 20% for states. At present, overall it is 68% of GDP. And in the interim time, the fiscal deficit targets can be fixed as 3% by financial year 2019-20 and 2.5% by financial year 2020-23, and from 2023 onwards, the main anchor must be public debt, which should be restricted to 60% of GDP for both the center and the states put together. And meanwhile, in the fiscal deficit target also, 0.5% deviation or escape clause is also recommended in case of unanticipated domestic developments, right? And at the same time, fiscal council must be created. Fiscal council must be created with independent experts that could sit in judgment on the need for deviations from the targets. Overall, government should move fast to implement encasing committee recommendations. So, here there are some important recommendations with regard to fiscal council, and the main anchor must be public debt by 2023, and a question is definitely expected in the mains examination with regard to revisiting the present provisions of FRBM Act, why it became necessary, what are the repercussions of encasing committee recommendations, and do you agree that public debt should be the anchor? And second point is, what role fiscal council do you visualize? Such type of questions are expected in the mains examination, right? Then as the days progress, we will discuss once again with the further aspects in focus, right. Next one is lonely and disinterested. In fact, this is a thought provoking article, and I expressed several times the economic might of China in our neighborhood. If you read this article, it is clearly evident India is somewhat becoming isolated in the geopolitics of not only South Asia, but in the region as a whole. India is becoming somewhat isolated, and this article is somewhat thought provoking, and the 21st century dominance, India may be losing at least as a regional power also. So, regionally also we may lose our dominance in 21st century because of several reasons. And here what is happening in 21st century? In a nutshell, please look at these 3-4 points. China is increasing its geostrategic presence not only in South Asia, not only South Asia, West Asia, it is trying to maintain balance between some of the powers like Saudi Arabia, Israel, Iran. China is trying to ensure balance in West Asia. At the same time, if you look at South Asia, in South Asia, China's economic might is quite prevalent, is quite evident in almost all the countries in our neighborhood. And Central Asia, in fact, Central Asia already the mechanism to reach Central Asia is in place, and in fact China will look at Central Asia, and now it is in fact, into the peace process of Afghanistan. The basic reason it is actively involving in the peace process of Afghanistan, because of the reason it wants to have its stake in Central Asia, right. So, in these three regions, in fact, China is active. It is increasing its geostrategic presence. China, Russia, Pakistan axis is on the rise. We are going to deliberate on this. China, Russia, Pakistan axis is on the rise. US appears to be withdrawing from the region, and a retired Pakistan army chief is going to take over as the first commander-in-chief of Saudi Arabia-backed Islamic military alliance. And we are not sure whether it is going to become Islamist NATO, you can call, and for that this Pakistani retired army chief is going to become the head. So, things are changing fast, and under these circumstances, why India is sitting silent? That is the question asked in this article, right. Let us go ahead and let us look at these three countries. This China, Russia, Pakistan axis. This is quite evident in recent times. If you look at China and Russia, this is China, this is Russia. Please look into this. China is ambitious. All of us have known about this. Then Pakistan is definitely opportunistic. It is leaving United States of America now. It is embracing friendship with Russia now. Then Russia is resurgent. Though its economy is somewhat not cooperating, but Russia is resurgent. China is ambitious. Pakistan is opportunistic. If you look at the relations, China and Russia are not the best of friends during Cold War. During the Cold War time, from 1950s to 1990, China and Russia were not the best of friends, and post-Soviet days also, that means since 1991 also, they were not close, but now coming together. These two countries are coming together now. If you look at China and Pakistan, they are allies since 1960s, no doubt, but now the bonds are strengthening. CPEC, billions of dollars of investment is one example. And if you look at Russia and Pakistan, this is quite evident here. This Russia-Pakistan axis, you see, or you can say Russia-Pakistan relation. In fact, Pakistan and Russia were Cold War rivals because Pakistan was towards the side of United States of America. Now it is abandoning United States of America. Now you see, Cold War rivals, Russia did not until recently share a close relationship. Until recently, Russia did not share close relationship with Pakistan, but everything is changing now. Now all that is changing. So, you see the axis, how it is unfolding because of ambitious China, resurgent Russia, opportunistic Pakistan, the things are changing. In fact, India is becoming somewhat lonely at this juncture. Actions of China and Russia, you see, both the countries are taking active role in geopolitics of West Asia. China felt that to take OBOR to the logical conclusion, it has to involve regional conflict resolution processes. Previously, China used to look at only its businesses. Now, it is actively involving in the conflict resolution processes, and it is involving in the geopolitics of the area, and in fact, this is a strategic shift in the China's polity. China changed its strategy of concentrating only on business to involving geopolitics in the area. And China is reaching out and balancing various adversaries such as Israel, Saudi Arabia and Iran in West Asia. So, how the geopolitics are turning in the region? Then, if you look at China and South Asia, why I kept India is going to be the loser. You see, in Afghanistan issue, in Afghanistan issue, China joined Afghanistan peace process. China joined Afghanistan peace process, and Chinese interests in Afghanistan reconciliation or ensuring peace in Afghanistan. There are two aspects to it. One is security or terrorism angle, and second important aspect is for the sustainability of OBOR. For the sustainability of OBOR, Afghanistan is the key country, because given its importance in providing access to Central Asia. So, in providing access to Central Asia, Afghanistan will become one of the key country. Now, China joined the Afghanistan peace process. So, Afghanistan peace process, China is involving quite actively. Look at the second issue. This is Central Asia, because you see Afghanistan, Central Asian countries have got a long border with Afghanistan, and for the success of this OBOR initiative, Afghanistan is one key country. That is point number one, what we have discussed. Second one, Sri Lankan issue. Already all of you are familiar with Hambantota port. If you look at Sri Lanka issue, Chinese presence is already there in Hambantota port, and there are news reports that the debt is going to be converted into equity. Then it is going to develop, China is going to develop Colombo Port City project, and ultimately it will establish its naval base at Hambantota in the years to come. Look at the next country, that is Maldives. This is Maldives, and here Chinese presence in Maldives is quite deep, and now there is a clause in Maldives, when investment is $1 billion or more, then they can take the islands of Maldives on long lease. So, in future what will happen? China will take the islands of Maldives on long lease, and subsequently they will establish their naval base there. If you look at Bangladesh, Bangladesh is at present closest ally of India, no doubt, but all this may change. Bangladesh at present is the closest ally of India, no doubt, but all this may change once the committed investment of billions of dollars from China flows into Bangladesh. Bangladesh is also going to attend OBOR summit on May 14th. More than 25 countries confirmed their presence for OBOR summit, which is going to be held on May 14th in China, and it may sign the initiative also. So, OBOR initiative, most likely Bangladesh may sign also, and Bangladesh in due course of time may tilt towards China. If not tilting towards China, Chinese presence will be there substantially in Bangladesh in the years to come because of the economic might. Then if you look at Pakistan, Pakistan is inching too closer to China because of CPEC, and neither China nor Pakistan is bothering, because that passes through Gilgit-Baltistan area. And in future, Gwadar port, this Gwadar port in future may become one more naval base for China. These are the things, please look at in the next 20 to 30 years. These are bound to going to happen. Next one is, if you look at Nepal, geographically Nepal is well connected to India, because huge mighty mountains are between Nepal and China. Otherwise, Nepal could have gone by this time towards China way at the time of Madhesi issue. Here, geographically, Nepal is well connected to India, and accessing China is difficult. Even though it tried several times to get access from China, but because of geographical constraints, it is still dependent on India. But in the near future, when the connectivity to Tibet is extended to Nepal, now connectivity to Tibet region of China is increasing. When ultimately the connectivity from Tibet is extended to Nepal, what will happen? Subsequently, Nepal also will have the presence of China in future. So, these are going to happen during the next 10 to 20 years. More than the article, I have added some more issues. And Russia, Pakistan, as I have already told you, Russia is going ahead with forging strategic ties with Pakistan. It lifted the arms embargo and Russia is selling weapons to Pakistan. And it is discussing future of Afghanistan with Pakistan, and it is doing joint military exercises. Joint military exercises started between the Cold War rivals Russia and Pakistan. When Russia joins VVPAT, then it will put Russia on the side of Pakistan over the Kashmir issue, because this CPEC is passing through Pak occupied Kashmir region. If that happens, India's historical relations with Russia may go down. So, these things are going to happen. Look at Pakistan. Pakistan, in spite of its credentials of aiding and abetting terrorists, both towards India, at the same time towards Afghanistan, now it is becoming a key country in South Asia geopolitics. You see the irony. Everyone knows Pakistan is perpetrating terrorism in the region, but it is becoming a key country in the South Asia geopolitics. It is becoming a regional favorite for both China and Russia, and the bond between Russia-Pakistan, China-Pakistan, which is called China-Russia-Pakistan axis, is going to be strengthened in the near future. So, now the fundamental question is India going to be isolated? SAARC is almost inactive, and there is no regional grouping at the present juncture which is active, which has got some sort of relations, business or economic or strategic. We have not promoted regional institutions, we are only discussing independently with various countries. Then, as I have already discussed, China's economic might is all around us, which may translate into strategic alliances with various countries in our neighborhood. Then, we have bent upon Masood Azhar for the past 2 years, and we are not able to look beyond that. What is happening? World is moving fast. In fact, China is calling this VVPAT conclave on May 14th in Beijing. Then tomorrow CPEC is going to become a reality, and then Pakistan will become regional player in spite of its dubious distinction of aiding and abetting terrorists. And this is the irony, but it is going to happen. With the billions of dollars in our adjacent countries, along with the CPEC, as well as imminent China, Russia, Pakistan axis, where are we heading for? Probably 10 to 20 years down the line, India may become isolated and we may be forced to toe the line of predominant powers in the region, and by that time it would be too late to become regional power on our own. So, these are the ground realities, and during the next 10-20 years, probably there is every likelihood that Chinese presence will be there all around us, and Pakistan will be strengthened in spite of its dubious distinction of aiding and abetting terrorists, and the present situation is somewhat geostrategically favorable to Pakistan, and India should realize this immediately and wake up immediately. Right. So, let us close this article here. One more article, this is with regard to Turkey, and I would not like to spend more time on this, 3-4 minutes. Turkey map, please go through this carefully. A potential question in preliminary is expected on various aspects pertaining to Turkey. And Turkey at a glance, the population is around 8 to 9 crores. We discussed previously, it is in Anatolian and Balkan peninsulas, partly in Asia, partly in Europe. Istanbul is the city, largest city, which is in 2 continents, Europe as well as Asia. So, the country Turkey is in Europe as well as Asia, please understand, and the largest minority group Kurds. And now here one important point you should not forget, And a question may be asked in the mains also, do you feel that the gap between elites, or you can say urban people, and rural hinterland in various countries is widening, or you can say urban areas or elite people are moving in one direction, whereas the people in the rural hinterland or small towns, they feel somewhat neglected. First incident, that is Brexit, predominantly cities like London voted to remain in European Union, but the rural hinterland voted for leaving European Union. Second example, Donald Trump. Donald Trump, predominantly the rural hinterland, or you can say small towns where manufacturing is affected, they voted predominantly for Donald Trump, whereas important cities, coastal rich areas deserted Donald Trump in the elections, or you can say they voted predominantly against Donald Trump. Similarly, this is the third case. In the referendum to strengthen the presidency in Turkey, this is the third case, to strengthen the presidency in Turkey. Here what happened? Elites in Ankara, Istanbul, they voted predominantly against more powers for the president, but the rural hinterland people, they voted for predominantly increasing the powers of the president. So, in fact, across the world, elites versus rural hinterland, this divide is widening. This is third example during the past 1 year. So, a question is expected, divide between elites and the rural hinterland people or small towns people is increasing day by day, please understand. So, this is the third example, and elites versus remote areas gap is widening across the world, and the areas located in remote parts of Anatolia region basically have long been neglected by the Istanbul elite, and they voted predominantly in other way. So, they voted for increasing the president's powers. Now, the final slide, is Turkey heading towards authoritarian regime? Now, more powers will be given for the president. It is becoming presidential republic from parliamentary republic. More and more powers, president will assume lot many powers, and at present already authoritarian tendencies are there. Kurds are being suppressed. Please look into this slide. There is a demand for Kurdistan. In fact, at present it is not active, but the feeling of separate Kurdistan is there among the Kurds, and Turkey nowadays is suppressing the human rights of Kurds. Then after the failed coup last year, several people have been arrested, 1 lakh employees were thrown out, several journalists were arrested, several restrictions were imposed on the canvassing for no vote. The fabric of Turkey is widely divided. 25 million people voted for yes, 24 million people voted for no. So, the style of Mr. Erdogan will further widen the divisions in the Turkish society, and as the time passes, there is every possibility that Erdogan may go in further authoritarian way. Right? So, with this, we came to the end of this lecture today. And please do join for comprehensionability discussion. We are going to discuss one important economic related issue. So, have a nice day. Thank you. Thanks a lot.